right, welcome everybody to UFO ET Experiencers. And today we have a fascinating guest, and she's been a guest on our program before, and I'm so happy that she's back with us. Her name is Barbara Lamb, and she has some exciting news to share with us about a book that she's just written and published. And she's going to be talking about walk-ins today. So, Barbara, I'd love to welcome you and thank you for coming in and being part of our group today.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm happy to be back with you all. I think that your group is a wonderful group, and it's wonderful that you provide this for people, because there are a lot of people kind of waking up, shall we say, these days, and wondering about themselves, and wondering about reality, and wondering about uh, unusual experiences that maybe they've had that they don't really understand what they are. So we're going to be talking about all of that sort of thing today. As Catherine had said, um, I have co-authored a book which I think might be very interesting to all of you, since this is an experiencers UFO ET experiencers support group, because what we're talking about is people, beings who are very, very much related to this whole subject of extraterrestrial and even other dimensional beings. So I'm going to hold up the book, although I guess it looks awfully blurry for some reason, but
Yeah, if
uh,
you bring it towards you, bring it towards your face. Yep, leave your face where it is and bring the book towards you. There we go. There we go. Now we can see it.
okay, so Cosmic Convergence, and the subtitle is Journeys of Walk-ins. I will be defining these things: walk-ins, starseeds, and hybrids. So some of you may have heard of some of those types of beings. Some of you maybe not. But I think it's really great for people to know that we have these kinds of beings, walk-in starseeds and hybrids, with us, and right here living along with us, and not standing out as looking like extraterrestrials or anything. So anyway, I'll go into defining that and why I think it's wonderful that we have these people with us. And my co-author, Sheila Seppi, is a walk-in. So I was hoping that she could come and speak for herself. We often do these talks together, but she's helping her father, who's having some medical issues and had to be taken to the doctor and so forth. And she didn't know if she would be free in time to be with us, but she sends her good wishes if she can't be here. Anyway, we'll get right into it. First of all, let's talk about walk-ins. So a walk-in is a soul who could be could have been in the spiritual realm, the spiritual dimension, or could have been an extraterrestrial in that realm of beings. And in any event, that soul wanted to come and help humanity by living here and giving a lot of helpful services to people. That's the whole motivation for being here. It's a completely good, benevolent motivation. So instead of doing what we all have done in terms of incarnating as a human, uh, because that takes a long time for a soul to get to maturity enough to really do their work that they want to do here. You know, we have to have life in the mother's womb, and then we have to go through the birth process and infancy and childhood and teenage years and young adult years before we really can get into whatever our mission is here. So instead of doing that, which all of us have done, and people usually do, they take kind of a shortcut. I mean, that means that um, they will, that soul of that one will look around for the soul of somebody who is already living here as a person and is already in the adult years in most cases. And they find somebody who just really doesn't want to be here anymore. The soul has just sort of had it in terms of this lifetime and would rather leave, rather just go back into the spirit realm. And so that person is not really going to commit suicide. It's not quite that drastic, but almost. And so the incoming soul finds the soul of the person here who doesn't really want to be here anymore. And they make an agreement on the soul level. The person here probably has no awareness of that. And the being out there probably doesn't, but the souls do. So the two souls make an agreement that at a particular time and place, it gets very, very specific, that the soul who is living here in the body of a person will be leaving that body and going into the spirit realm at the very same moment that the incoming spirit, that is the walk-in part of it, the incoming spirit takes up residence in that body, and then from then on takes on life as that person. So that is a walk-in situation. And Sheila Seppi is one of those walk-ins. So she describes it very vividly, but I'll try to represent her on that. So from then on, that soul lives in that body, lives the life here that that person whose soul left has been living. In other words, uh, the incoming one will be in the same family, have the same marriage if that original person was married, and have children if the original person had children. So the incoming soul will just pick up, uh, carry on the life of that original person. So what that means, of course, is that that original person who had a certain personality and style and interests and so forth, that that person seems to have changed very drastically in terms of other people having known that person, especially family members. They suddenly realize one day, because this very often happens, the exchange very often happens in the middle of the night. So the family and friends of that original person who now has the new soul living in her or him, the original person, they notice tremendous changes. Like suddenly, why did you change? I mean, what happened? Why do you seem so different now? And the differences show up in terms of what the new person, the new soul in the person, is interested in, and where their focus is, what they want to do, what they seem to be thinking, seems to be, suddenly very different. So this is mysterious, as you can imagine, to the people who have been close to that original person, that suddenly that person seems to be so different. And things that others notice right away is that this person now, they don't know that there's been a walk-in soul exchange. They just know that the person is different, looks like the same person. But very often the person who has wanted to leave and has agreed to the soul exchange, that very often that person had really had some serious problems, health problems, maybe in some cases, or allergy problems, things that had maybe been going on for years in some cases. So with Sheila, the woman she did the exchange with, a 38-year-old woman, that woman had had many different kinds of really severe physical problems. And I mean, I'm astonished at all the problems that one person had had. So, of course, that was a good motivation for her to be sick and tired of all that, all the pain and all the doctors, all the different difficulties. And so we can see why she didn't want to be in life anymore. So Sheila, when she did the walk-in experience and started living and carrying on the life of that original person, she inherited, of course, all the physical difficulties, but because she came from a much higher plane, much more advanced beings out there in space, very spiritually advanced, very advanced in terms of methods of healing and so forth, that she very quickly, she says almost instantly, was healed of about 5 or 6, really severe problems, rheumatoid arthritis, um, multiple sclerosis, just lots of really, really difficult and painful situations. So here she was in this other body, not having been accustomed to being in a human body, and had to pick up the life of that person, raise the 3 children that original woman had. And she did, fortunately, have a wonderful feeling of love for those children. And then that original person was married, and it was evident very, very quickly that the new person in the former wife's body was very, very different, and they just were not on a similar wavelength anymore. And that marriage ended after a few months, and they just weren't resonant with each other. And so Sheila went on continuing to raise the children. Some of them were quite young. One was the oldest one, I think, was a young teenager, and they're all adult now. And they've had a wonderful, wonderful relationship. And of course, Sheila coming in as a walk-in sort of inherited, shall we say, the original family of that person. And it's with that original father that she is right now, helping him with some medical issues. So Sheila came in with lots of abilities, which she has been using ever since she came in. She came in the 1990s. And so she's been using these skills such as physical healing skills, and now has as a wonderful healing clinic, which she does this healing work in, along with her son, whom she taught wonderful methods of healing, and he's assisting her in that work, and they're helping a lot of people. She's also gone on to help in the sense of forming a group. Some of you might have heard of it, called the Galactic Alliance. And that group has been putting on seminars and conferences and doing podcasts and getting the information out, which is helping people to raise their consciousness and increase their spirituality. it's all for good service, definitely. And she has formed a group called the Conscious Awakening Network, and people can uh, become part of that if they want to. And if they have material to share of a higher spiritual nature, higher consciousness nature, uh, if they want to share podcasts and maybe films or whatever they have done to share what they know, they can join the Conscious Awakening Network and get some of their work shown visually. So in terms of podcasts, so that's a wonderful format for people who are really growing spiritually and would like to share what they know. So it's growing. It's she's got an amazing amount of people involved in that, and more are joining all the time. So, in other words, this consciousness raising and spiritual encouragement and educating is really blossoming and is happening much more because of this one walk-in, Sheila Seppi. So basically, that sort of thing is very typical of other walk-ins, and they're all here for very benevolent services. All wanted to take that shortcut, shall we say, rather than developing in a mother's womb and being born and going through childhood and so forth, and all of those years before they can get to their work. So she has formed a network of other walk-ins who are able to talk very freely with each other, and they understand each other. Very often people who don't know anything about this sort of thing are not that rewarding to talk with about what the walk-ins experience, because they just know that these other people won't understand, maybe won't even want to hear about it. In other words, there's so many people, I don't think that includes you here in this group, but so many people, as you probably all know, uh, have a certain set of ideas about reality. And if anybody introduces anything different, like having experiences with other beings from space or seeing UFOs, there are always those people who just don't want to hear about it and just turn it off right away and think, oh, you must be making that up, or that must be a dream that you had rather than a real experience. So it's wonderful, as you know, because you're part of this group, that it's just great when you can really talk about those things and hear about those unusual experiences from each other. It validates all of this for you, helps to understand some of what you've been wondering about. So it's great that Sheila has founded these forums, the Galactic Alliance and the Conscious Awakening Network, so that people can get online. It's mostly done online, sometimes in person conferences. But anyway, they can gather one way or another and share what they have experienced and what they know, and uh, increase each other's understanding, validate each other's experiences. So that's a really wonderful thing. So I personally have known um, 6 or maybe 7 now people, and have worked with them in terms of doing hypnotic regressions with them, which is the main part of my work nowadays. And for a long time now, in fact, since the mid 1980s. And people really, really appreciate being able to come and find out more about themselves and about experiences that they have had, in many cases with other beings, and can learn more about why they are here and what kind of contribution to life in general that they could be making here with whatever their particular interests are and their abilities are. So it's been very wonderful and interesting for me to really personally get to know some of these hybrids. Some of them have come from a much more spiritual dimension rather than extraterrestrial, and they are here for spiritual reasons, to really encourage people to increase their own spirituality and have more spiritual focus and more spiritual experiences. Uh, and those are wonderful people, hybrids, walk-ins too. And then there are many people who've come in from the extraterrestrial realm and are now living as walk-ins and serving to acquaint people more with the whole reality of extraterrestrials and educating them about, particularly about the benevolent species out there, which there are many of, and some of their very positive concern and caring about Earth itself, and certainly about humanity. So anyway, it's going on there, whether we know that they're walk-ins or not. There are a lot of people amongst us now, which is great, who are serving, helping in that benevolent way. So then in this book, Cosmic Convergence, we also have a whole section about the starseeds. And some of you might very well be starseeds. A starseed is a person born here on Earth, living the whole life here on Earth, but in previous lives, they had been extraterrestrial beings. Some of them have had lifetimes of being one kind of being, and then another series of lifetimes being another species of extraterrestrial beings, and maybe even lifetimes being a third kind of extraterrestrial beings. So they definitely have that heritage, that lineage, and yet now they have chosen to have a lifetime as a human being. And indeed, just like the walk-ins, they look completely like human beings. Nobody would look at them and say, oh, wow, that's a different sort of person. No, they're just regular people in terms of how they look and what their lives are, but they're just giving more service than many of us humans are giving. So they do different things like having healing practices. Uh, Most of them do have that sort of healing ability, or they're doing counseling um, of a more raised consciousness level. They are acquainting people with the extraterrestrial reality. That's a big part of what they do. They want people on Earth to realize that there are many, many wonderful benevolent species out there, in addition to the ones that the media typically seems to put forth, talk about, like the little gray beings, for instance, who uh, do a lot of physical examining and poking and probing and so forth. And I think the media in general tends to make the extraterrestrials seem more fearsome, uh, more worrisome to us. And there are some that people do not really enjoy being with, that's for sure. I don't think any of the species are here to uh, hurt people deliberately or to harm people, but some of them do more scientific investigation on people's bodies, and the people do not enjoy that in some cases. And some of them do a hybridization process which some people are really okay with, and some people do not like some of the procedures, like taking eggs from female bodies and taking sperm from male bodies. But once they come to really understand what that's all about and why the beings are doing that, oh, it gives a much more acceptable look to the whole process. Anyway, the starseeds are here looking like, acting like, being like regular people. They did not walk in and do a soul exchange. But as I said, they have this extraterrestrial lineage that they have come from. So they really have a sense of understanding about the other beings, especially the kinds of beings that they used to be in previous lifetimes, and a much broader understanding of extraterrestrials on the whole range of those beings. So they can help us with that. So sometimes a person will, grow through many years of life to, maybe their 30s or 40s or 50s, and then they will come to me because by that time they have realized that they have a sense of being here for, excuse me, for a particular purpose. And they don't really know for sure what that purpose is. So they will come for regressions to find that out. And they do find it out in the regression. And then that really kind of gives them encouragement to go on and do more of that particular service that they realize that they have the abilities to do. And they're always very relieved when they realize what their purpose is. It's kind of like the go-ahead signal. And very often their services involve receiving messages from some of the beings that they originally had been. And in other words, they do channeling, or some of them just simply get what they call downloads of information and are encouraged to share that in one way or another by a broadcast like this, or being part of certain groups, or writing things, or doing podcasts or films about that information, that part of reality. Anyway, they are here to serve in many, many ways. And in that category also, there are star children, star kids. In some cases, they are called. And there are even people, I know one on the West Coast and I know one on the East Coast, who make it their mission to identify these star children and get them together in groups with willing adults who are very interested in this, and to help those kids to really develop the very fine, unusual abilities they have. Many of them have a whole range of psychic abilities. Some are very, very interested in technology and start using technology in a more advanced way than most of us do, even when they're very, very young. It just seems to be a natural knowing for them. And they all seem to have healing abilities as well as a whole range of psychic abilities. And, sometimes these star kids grow up in families that just don't understand them and don't recognize the special abilities. They might think the kid is a little bit strange because he seems to be talking to disincarnate spirits, for instance, or talk about the visitors in his room at night, which come from somewhere else. They're definitely not human. But lucky are the kids whose families, encourage their talking about that and accept what they say, and maybe even uh, let them go for special training to develop their healing skills or their psychic skills or their channeling ability or whatever their strengths seem to be. So anyway, that is a wonderful whole group, the children and the starseed adults. We give attention to in this book, Cosmic Convergence. And I think it's a lovely thing that um, Sheila has had me um, give examples from the regression work I've done, examples of 5 or 6 different walk-in people I have worked with in regression and counseling, and about 5 or 6 different people who are starseeds who have come to me. And so I give sort of summaries of the work that I have done with each of those types of people. And the same with a third type of people, the ET human hybrids, of which we do have quite a number on Earth. I can't give you a total number, but I know that I personally worked with 8 hybrids who are living here and co-wrote the book about that with Miguel Mendonça. That book is called Meet the Hybrids, The Lives and Missions of ET Ambassadors on Earth. And indeed they are. All of these actually are ambassadors, I feel, from another realm or from the extraterrestrial realm. So the hybrids are born here, and the same way that the rest of us are. They look totally human. They live their whole lives here with us, but they were created by the extraterrestrial beings. And during their lives here on Earth, they have lots and lots of visits from the extraterrestrial types who gave them their genetics. So I may have talked to this group about the hybrids before, but I'll run over it again, just in case we might have some new listeners. So what happens with hybridization is that a woman here, or a female, could even be a girl, could even be a young girl here, human, who will have eggs removed from her body by the beings, the extraterrestrial beings, and they keep those eggs, and then eventually um, they combine them with sperm that they have taken from a human male. It might be a grown-up male, it might be a younger male. But anyway, they mix the eggs and the sperm together and then add to that mixture extraterrestrial genetics. And usually, at least with the hybrids I personally know and have worked with, the extraterrestrial genetics comes not just from one being and one type, but maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 in one cases, different species of extraterrestrial beings are contributing their genetic to this particular mix of human eggs and sperm. So basically, they create an embryo which has been hybridized, and they, on a certain occasion, will take that woman whose eggs they have already had, and they will implant this embryo in her uterus. So therefore, she is pregnant, and one, one of 2 things can happen after a couple of months. In some cases, that little embryo is removed from the woman, and usually she doesn't know about any of this at all because she's put into a state of not being conscious for these encounters when these things happen. So in many cases, the eggs are taken from her after about 2 months or so, maybe 2.5 months in some cases, and before which she has been declared pregnant. She feels pregnant and she goes to a doctor, and the doctor validates, yes, indeed, you are pregnant. But then after a couple of months or so, that little embryo is removed from the woman. And if it's going to be a hybrid who will be living on the ship for its entire life, in other words, it has more extraterrestrial material in it than it has human material and genetics. So then that little embryo is removed and put into a special tank, looking like a glass tank of special fluid on the spaceship, and gestated until ready to be quote unquote born. In other words, taken out of that special tank and then raised on the ship. And those hybrids will live their entire life either on the ship or sometimes on uh, another planet that those beings have come from. So those are the kinds of beings that we don't see here on Earth because they're not human enough to really survive here on Earth. And many people do meet them, experiencers of extraterrestrial contact, do very often have a chance to meet them if they do have these hybrid children. They meet them on the ship, and there are many, many instances that have come out of regressions that I have done with people who have had hybrid children formed with their material, but the hybrid children are living on the ship. And some people get to know them over a period of years and actually develop a relationship with them if they're open to it. And other people have hybrid children and are not really showing any indication of being wanting to get to know those children and develop a relationship. So they, maybe see the children once or twice when they're babies, and that's about it. But some people have a wonderful relationship with those children and would like to go and visit them a lot more often. In fact, I have worked with many, many women who really sincerely wish that they could bring their hybrid child or children, in some cases, back to Earth and raise them here. But they're always told, no, they can't do that because these babies have much more of a proportion of extraterrestrial in them than human, and they would not be able to survive here. So they need to remain on the ship with their kind of beings, the extraterrestrial beings. Uh, and some people can go for years and years and years and not even know that they have hybrid children on the ship and are very surprised. Maybe they're in their 50s or 60s or so forth, and they realize that one way or the other they're told by the beings, or they get to meet them quickly, or find out one way or another that they are parents of children. Now, these parents, I'm talking about the Earth parents, human parents, may very well have their own human children right here on Earth, and sometimes they have both. So um, it's really a huge subject in itself. But the hybrids that we have talked about in this book, Cosmic Convergence, are the ones who um, were hybridized the way that I have mentioned and left in the mother's womb for the full term of gestation. And then they are born of the human mother here on Earth, the way that we all are born, either a natural birth or a cesarean, or however it needs to happen. And so, right from the beginning, they are living here on Earth, and they live their entire life on Earth. And so these are the ones that we have emphasized in the book, the ET human hybrids who live here for a whole lifetime amongst us. And these are very interesting people, wonderful people. First of all, they look completely human. Nobody would ever come across them and think, oh, how unusual that person looks. In a few cases of hybrids I have met, um, their eyes might be a bit larger than ours, and they're usually very beautiful, totally human looking eyes. I've met a few like that, and I think, wow, that would be a clue that that person could be a hybrid. But I also know many hybrids whose eyes are just the regular size that the rest of our eyes are. And so they just don't look different at all. You wouldn't necessarily have a clue. Some of them do, however, have somewhat of a different energy. And when I met my first two people who are hybrids living here, I had an immediate sense of something really different. In fact, the first person I met, a woman named Cynthia Crawford. Some of you might know her or know of her because she did years of making really nice sculptures of a whole variety of extraterrestrial beings. And she always did that in kind of a meditative state. And she made the sculptures to look just like she was being told by the real beings through meditation, just exactly how to do these sculptures, exactly what they should look like to represent those particular beings. But anyway, when I met her at a conference, we were both putting mayonnaise or something on a sandwich at a sort of a kiosk in the middle of the hallway of this particular UFO conference. This was back in the 1990s. And I noticed there was somebody reaching for the mayonnaise as I was reaching for it. So I looked at this person standing next to me and saw her eyes, which were definitely bigger than most of our eyes, but looking very human. And I looked at her and I said, oh, like, wow. And she said, what? Like, why are you looking at me like that? And I said, well, I hope you don't mind my saying this, but you remind me of a hybrid. And at that point, I didn't know that there were any hybrids living here. And she said, with a big smile, I am a hybrid. Good for you. So that started a wonderful friendship between the two of us that went on from years until she passed on, about 3 or 4 years ago now. And then at another UFO conference, about a year or so later, somebody was brought over to where I was standing to introduce me to this person, another woman. And I looked at her, and before anybody said anything, I immediately said, oh, you remind me of a mantis being, mantis extraterrestrial being. And she smiled and she leaned forward and she said, good for you for recognizing that. I am a mantis being. In other words, a mantis hybrid. So I got to know that woman, and she had her stay with me for, about 5 days and go to a conference with me. And I absolutely resonated with the fact that I could believe that she was a hybrid because she had so many accurate intuitions and psychic abilities and ability to communicate with dogs in my town that we came across, and uh, just a wonderful, wonderful people. And she is here on a mission to uh, find and identify star children, star kids, she calls them, and speak to the parents and ask the parents if she can meet with these star children, get a few of them together, and help to increase their knowing of why they're here and to help them develop their special abilities that they came into life with. And so that's a very good service. And then I kept meeting other people here and there who uh, were hybrids, and was invited to a big group of hybrids out in the Palm Springs area of Southern California, and had 2 long weekends with the whole group except for me, being hybrids. And I thought, these are really wonderful, wonderful people. And they certainly look like regular human people. I wouldn't have thought anything different if I didn't know that they were hybrids. But that was wonderful, spending time with them and hearing them talk about their experience and their contacts and the beings whose genetics they had. So all of these hybrids who live on Earth have lots and lots of visits from their what they call their real family, their extraterrestrial beings, their star family, as they often call it. So even from a very, very young age, these hybrid children have a very strong feeling that the family that they were born to isn't their real family, their true family, and that their true family is somehow out there amongst the stars in the sky. And they don't know why they feel this. And the parents don't know why they feel this. The parents always insist, we watched you being born. We are your family. You were born here of us. And these hybrid children say, well, I know, I believe you, but still somehow my real family is out there in space, and I miss them. So some of these hybrid children would go out the daytime or the nighttime and look up at the sky and say out loud, why don't you come for me? I miss you. It's okay here, but I long to see you. I miss you. And so uh, that goes on for the whole life, except that even from a very young age, they are visited by these extraterrestrial beings, the ones whose genetics they have. And so they completely welcome them. It's really different from them than for many other children who have visits with these beings and are maybe not very comfortable with it. Like they'll tell their parents, oh, another one of those monsters came out of, or the funny little people came out of the closet last night, or oh, another one was leaning over my crib or my child's bed. And they'd be aware of them for just a few moments, and then the rest of the experience would happen with those beings without awareness, conscious awareness of it. But we can recover those happenings in detail in the regression if the person wants to. Uh, so anyway, those are the hybrids living amongst us, and they have a whole range of psychic abilities which they use. They do things that we don't normally do as children, like um, complain about the density here on planet Earth. I mean, I never thought of density. Maybe some of you have, but I never felt that it was too dense here. But those beings, because they have experiences, even from a very, very young age, on the spaceships where it's not so dense in terms of the atmosphere, the energy, the frequency. Uh, so they really notice the difference here, which they're here most of the time, of course. Um, and they all have healing abilities. If there's a little wounded animal in their neighborhood, they'll detect it and they'll go and heal the animal or the bird or the lizard or whatever it is, or even heal people. I mean, I know two kids uh, whose mother had a very severe cut on her hand, from paring a vegetable or fruit or something. And it was bleeding profusely. And the two little kids who were there in the kitchen with her just immediately went into their healing mode, which appeared like doing Tai Chi sort of movements that they had learned on the spaceship because they were experiencers of extraterrestrial contact. And so they did these sort of moving, healing motions, sending out energy with their little hands. And that cut just healed up. Instead of continuing to bleed, it just came together and started forming a scar right away. And, by the end of the day, there was hardly even any indication that that severe cut had happened because these kids had healed it. So that's what a lot of children do. And they kind of smoke out a need, like, oh, a neighbor, there's a neighbor over there who really is having a lot of pain. I think I'll go and visit. And the mother will say, well, why? I mean, how do you know that? And the child will just say, I just I feel it. I just know it. And so they have these abilities and they like to act on them because basically they, like the Starseeds and the Walk-ins, are here to help wherever they can help, to help humanity. And of course, as these hybrids grow older, they do a lot to raise the consciousness and including the spirituality of other people, however and wherever they can. And again, they live lives like the starseeds without being detected as being part extraterrestrial. They look like normal people. It's just that they do have a lot of unusual abilities and unusual inclinations. They're interested very often, these hybrid kids, as with the starseeds too, very interested in nature, in the natural world, and preserving the natural world. That seems to be of great interest to most of them. They're very, very bothered by things like all the polluting that we do and all the natural resources that we use, for our own comfort and convenience. And they want the whole system here to be different. They want us to use natural means of generating energy rather than oil and coal and so forth. And pollution really, really bothers them. They also express often uh, objecting to the density here on the ships, as I mentioned, because they have enough visits on the spaceships with their kind of beings whose genetics they have uh, to really notice a difference when they come back to Earth. That it's dense, it feels sort of heavy, sort of sluggish. They describe it in terms like that to be here on the Earth. But anyway, they have a whole lifetime here, having been born here. And through all of those years, they've got plenty of good years for giving service. And very often they receive messages from their extraterrestrial beings, like sort of channeled messages or sometimes downloads, whole chunks of information from the beings whose genetics they have. And they give a lot of information, if allowed, about the extraterrestrial beings and what they're like and what they're all about and their motivations in relation to Earth. So we get a tremendous sense from them about the benevolence of many, many of those extraterrestrial species and how caring they are about humans and about all life forms on Earth and the Earth itself. So, this is so different than what is presented often in the media of, fierce reptilian beings or the little gray beings who are here to, cut people up and scrape and scoop and poke and, just heartless and mean. And there are those types of beings amongst the many, many kinds of extraterrestrial beings. But these beings have the genetics from the beings who are much more kind-hearted, benevolent, caring, and they are here to do something with that caring. So I think it is really a wonderful thing that we have them amongst us. And all of these groups, the Walk-ins, the Starseeds, and the Hybrids, one of their missions is to help to acquaint people here on Earth who don't experience these things, to acquaint regular people with the fact that there is so much intelligent extraterrestrial life out there in space. I know that I certainly grew up with no inkling of that at all. Um, I had plenty of good education and lots of exposure to movies and books, writing, and so forth, but never ever did I have any awareness that there really are beings out there. I was aware of science fiction, and I went to see the movie E.T. when that first came out and loved it, and just felt very moved that there were beings out there in space, and that one of the beings, the little E.T. being, could actually come and be here and make friends with the kids here, and yet wanted to go home. I was very, very moved by that, thinking it was nice science fiction, very interesting science fiction. And then Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that movie I saw. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be interesting if there was such a thing as these other beings who could come here in a beautiful, big, round craft? And was inspired by that and by the experiences of the people in that movie, but still thinking it was just science fiction. And so it wasn't until 1991 that I actually had people coming to me for the reason of finding out about what those real experiences were they were sometimes having with visits from unusual beings who certainly seem to be not from here, not anything that we are familiar with. And I just opened to that right away. One of the things that influenced me to be open about that was that I read in the 1970s, um, I read the book called The Little Prince by Anton Saint-Exupéry, a French author, about this little prince who came, a little boy with a blonde curly hair, which I identified with because my hair at that time was very short and very, very curly. And this little prince came from a very small planet out there where he lived by himself somehow. And he came and landed in the desert. I think it was probably the Sahara Desert, had lots of sand dunes. And it just happened that a French man who was a pilot of a very small plane had been flying over that area and crashed his plane. He was okay, but the plane was malfunctioning, and they became very good friends. And I thought, how sweet that somebody from another planet could actually make a very dear friendship with a human man. And then at the end of the book, the little prince decides it's time to go back home, which means back to his little planet. And he sits on a stone wall, and a snake comes and bites him. And apparently that's a poisonous snake. And he dies, but goes back home with wonderful, caring, loving greetings to the Frenchman, the pilot. And I mean, it's obvious that they've become very, very dear, dear friends, even though they're, somewhat different from each other. And then the little prince says at the very end, anytime you want to see me, if you miss me, and you look up at the sky and you see one little star that's especially twinkling, that's me on my little planet thinking of you. Well, when I read that in the 1970s, I cried. I was so moved that there could be such a thing that I thought was totally impossible at the time, of somebody coming from another planet and making a really close friendship with a human here. And that it was a very dear, special relationship that they had. And I just cried for a few hours, just thinking, oh, how special. I wish there were such a thing as that, as somebody coming from another planet and making a close friendship with a human. Well, so it was probably, I don't know, 15 years later that the first person actually came to me here for regression work about that sort of thing, about visitors having come, usually in the night, but sometimes in the daytime, and taking them away for a little while. And wow, with the first person I worked with, that just really opened up after 6 sessions, and she had been so totally traumatized and terrified by these unusual beings coming to her. But after we had done a few regression sessions and she realized the good that they had done for her, including a couple of healings of severe physical situations she had. And we, both of us together, learning about this, realizing, oh, wow, they certainly looked freaky and she was really scared to death. But turns out that they were really, really helpful and in their own way, very caring about her. So that was a good opening for me in getting into this work, being willing to work with other people who were having these unusual experiences. So I've been doing that since 1991 and still am doing it a lot, almost every day. And nowadays it's great because a person can come and visit me in person for a regression. I'm in San Diego, California, or they can just as easily, just as effectively do the regression appointment online, like we're doing right now. And I think those appointments are just as effective online, really, as they are in person. So that is great because it opens it up to being available to more people. In fact, I have people from many other countries doing sessions with me online, and that would not be possible, of course, if we didn't have the internet and these features available to us. So, anyway, that's the story of the book, Cosmic Convergence. And Sheila also goes into many, many aspects of these walk-in souls. There are different kinds of walk-ins, in the sense that some of them can come in for a while, a period of a few years, and then leave that body while another soul, comes in to live in the body as that person and serve in his or her own way. And there can be like a combination, maybe two souls that will come into a person and do the soul exchange, as she did with the original soul of the person leaving and going into the spirit realm. And she goes into quite a number of different types of walk-in situations, and of course tells about her own in depth as well. And it's just brings it to a real human level that I give the case summaries of people who've done regression work with me to their walk-in experiences, or to their being a starseed, or being a hybrid. So I wonder now if there are any questions that people might have.
Oh, wow.
And
Wow. Thank you
any-
so much, Barbara. That was fantastic. Um, well, I have a couple questions, if that's okay.
okay.
All right. So the walk-ins. Now, I have met people that are walk-ins, but I know Sheila, and she shared her story here a couple years back. But I also met a gentleman who had a walk-in when he was born, actually.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. The baby didn't survive, but his, being walked in, and he was very connected to different ETs. And um but it is interesting, the crossover between people that are walk-ins and have that experience of like a feeling of being um reborn, okay, or you know and people that have had awakenings, spiritual awakenings,
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
Kundalini awakenings, where they actually feel like they are reborn and their whole understanding of reality is totally changed. So
Right. So
I
you're talking
wonder,
about the Kundalini
yeah,
rising. Uh,
yeah, the awakening process. What I'm wondering about walk-ins, do most of them remember the moment when they were switched, where their soul came in, or that part of their soul came in,
Well,
and the other part left?
with the walk-ins whom I have known personally and worked with, they did not remember that. However, when they did a regression to what happened, then they remembered in great detail.
Mhm,
But usually just consciously going about their life, they didn't. There may be some that remember, but I don't know of them.
mhm.
Yeah.
And could it be that that's an aspect of the higher self, or the oversoul, that is coming in, that's more spiritually evolved? And
Yes, it's a good, very good question. And Sheila would go into this in more depth than I would. But yes, this the soul she goes on to explain that each one of us is a soul. It's not that we have a soul, but
Mm.
we are a soul. And at this point in time, we are having the experience of being a soul in a human body. But the soul also, so this would be true of every single one of us, the soul would have various other aspects of it that might be living as another person or another kind of being at the same time that we're living, in a human body
Right.
as a human being. And so we are much more than we have been thinking we are. At least
Yeah.
I can say that for myself, you know, totally authentically that I am, and this is true for all of you, that I am so much more than I thought because I'm not aware of other aspects of me existing somewhere else at the same time, but there probably are other aspects of me. And a couple of times I've had people come to me for regression who actually had some sense here and there, kind of like a very quick glimpse of another aspect of them living somewhere else. In fact, one man, he was in my experiencer support group, which would meet in my living room for years, and he sometimes would speak about how he had had just a flash of awareness of coming back over a fence from another life that he was living. And
Mm.
that must have meant another aspect of his soul that
Right.
he at least temporarily would be in touch with. So he knew that he had another life going on at the same time that he wasn't very aware of, except when he would be coming back over that fence into this life. He knew that he had a whole family there. He had a wife and children there, and he had a wife and children here. So he didn't know very much about them, but he would be reminded of that every once in a while, maybe once a year or so. I
Yeah.
have this quick memory of coming back over the fence into this life, which is where he was concentrating his
Mm.
attention, of
Yeah.
course. But there was that other one going on.
Yeah. It could be explained as parallel lives too. Somebody had just
Yeah,
mentioned in the
right.
chat.
And then it's all part of the same soul.
Right.
So it's not just that we're one person here and we have one soul that's just totally, focused on us, but that soul, as Sheila describes, the soul is like the fist, and then there are all these different fingers
Yeah.
going on the wall. They could all be having different experiences,
Yeah.
including in the extraterrestrial realm, while
Very,
we're here being a human on Earth.
yeah. I have one more question and then I'm going to get to people that have their hands up. So with star seeds, is it my understanding that a star seed is somebody that is not a hybrid, but that they are more because the hybrids, it's my understanding that they have been genetically manipulated or modified, right, in some physical aspect. And
Right.
so they have memories of maybe being abducted with that word abducted, right?
Mhm.
And then they learn later on about their connection, their true connection to these beings and why, why they're having those experiences. But with star seeds, are those people they generally don't have abductions because they're not physically um genetically modified, right, for lack of a better word with me, but are
Yeah.
they more, is it more like their soul aspect has these multidimensional connections to these other beings, and they have a remembrance of that. And so there, it just comes in with them in the human body when they're born, and they're just always aware that there's something kind of different about them, and they feel like they're family. I'm just
Well, very often they eventually come to realize,
Mhm.
so that could happen at different ages for different star seeds, but they eventually come to realize that, uh, oh, yeah, they really are having a lot of contact
Mhm.
with those beings. So they don't necessarily have the genetics physically,
Right.
but they know that they have a connection with them. And
Mhm.
sometimes consciously, they remember that, little glimpses of lifetimes that they have previously had
Mhm.
as an extraterrestrial being. And sometimes they haven't consciously known that, but they know that they somehow have special beings that they're related to in some way. And
Right.
that in regression, is when it sometimes comes out that, oh yeah, they were that type of being or several different types of beings in several different lifetimes. So, but
Right.
they don't necessarily uh, go through their whole lives being consciously aware of that.
Right. Well, I'm
They,
glad you cleared that up, because I've often wondered myself, why are there people that have abduction experiences, and then there are other people that don't have abduction experiences, but they're contactees and they've had a lot of connections to their beings, you know? So I'm
well,
glad that you were able to differentiate between those different groups and
yeah.
and the
So
groups.
the ones who have the experiences with their own kind of being that they were, the star seeds, or even if they haven't been that other species in previous lifetimes, but they may have a feeling like there's some kind of connection. And sometimes it's kind of vague with some people, like just like I just keep going out every night and looking up at the sky and just now nobody else I know does that, but I need to do it. I
Right.
had friends say that I'm working with a man right now who goes out every night. His wife doesn't go out with him, but he does. Uh, and just looking at this guy, and he actually not only sees crafts once in a while in the sky and even quite close to where he lives, like over the house or over the side yard. Uh, but he also, with night vision goggles, he sees these beings. He calls them spiders, but I wouldn't personally call them spiders, but he's shown me pictures, plenty of them on his cell phone. And so they're designs made with lines that look like spider web lines, not forming a round spider web, but all kinds of really interesting shapes. And they respond to him. So here he is out in the yard looking through his night vision binoculars, and he sees them, like sees one over here, and he'll talk to it, and it will respond and it'll move over there. And then
Oh,
he'll say, could you go higher, please? And it'll go higher. I mean, it seems like there's some
wow.
intelligence there.
Yeah.
And
Is he able to film it? Does he
yeah,
film it? Yeah. Very
he's
cool.
got
Yeah.
videos and he has pictures with his
Nice.
the night vision goggle binoculars. And
Wow.
uh, he says he goes out almost every night. And there's a neighbor man across the street who is very interested in this. And sometimes that man will come and join him and take a turn with the binoculars, and say, oh yeah, I see there's one over there. Oh, it's moving now. Oh, I'm going to follow it. Oh yeah, it's over here, you know. And
It's great. He's got a partner in crime there, right? They're both
oh,
out there watching. That's awesome.
so pleased that he has somebody
Yeah.
to share this with. And he has me, and I'm very excited. And I say, keep sending me pictures.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
see, I want to see what happens with that. Uh,
I
so
know.
yeah, so it's very interesting to me how many people I've worked with who um, have really been having experiences of this sort and have not been consciously aware of it. And
Yeah.
they really benefit. They really express being happy about it when they discover through the regression that, oh, that's what's going on. Or,
Yeah. And then it
oh,
makes sense to them, right? They probably, it's like
I'm in
whole
contact
puzzle
with them.
comes together. Yeah.
Yeah, how special. You know,
Yeah.
I've never had anyone since I started doing this in 1991. Um, I've never had anyone who's ever said, "Oh, I wish I hadn't known about that."
Right.
You know, they
Right.
always, "Oh, wow, that's important for me to know. I'm
Yep.
so glad I know about this." Even with the beings who do not seem to be especially wonderful. In fact, very often the little gray being types are described by people who experience them as being just kind of almost mechanical or
Right.
robot-like in some cases, and yet they seem to be living. So that's confusing to people. But they're
Sure.
much more matter of fact. They don't seem to have appreciation for what the person might be experiencing. But I have found with so many of the regressions that I've done that if a person is in an abduction experience and is on a medical type table, which is very typical. Not everybody experiences that in every encounter, but it happens a lot. And oh, maybe they're being poked and probed and so forth, and they can't move, and the table is kind of cold and hard, and not a pleasant experience for sure. And then these beings around them just look so unusual to the person, and all of that can be quite disturbing. uh, but when I ask if they would like to know what those beings are doing and why, and the person usually says, yes, I would like to know, and I say, well, you can ask them out loud or just in your mind, and they'll be able to pick it up. And they ask, and they almost always get an answer from the beings that really, really makes sense. And so often those physical exams are for the beings to know whether the person is doing well physically or if there's anything going on in the body that needs to be healed. And if there is something wrong going on in the body, the beings will usually heal it right then and there, uh, usually by using light, some form of light in some way. There are many different ways that have come up that the beings have used light for healing. Or in some cases, they'll tell the person, well, we've been checking your body very thoroughly, and we notice that there's a problem with your pancreas. Let's say, as an example, that happened with one person. And instead of healing it, they will tell the person, you have a problem with your pancreas, which we've detected, and we strongly suggest that when you are back on Earth, you go to your Earth doctor and tell him to check your pancreas because there is a problem in it. And when that person or when those people have followed through and told their doctor about a problem that had been detected by these other beings, indeed, it turns out that there is a problem there, and then the person gets regular medical help for that. So in either case, the beings are being very, very helpful
Mm.
and important for the person. And
Yeah.
yet they may not, unless they have asked like
Mhm.
that, they don't know. They're just afraid of it and they think of it very negatively. I can
Right.
appreciate why they do. But it's worth looking into it in more detail, I think, to find out. There's so much
Oh,
that found out that the person would never know. Of
yeah. And it's always, it always seems to be a benevolent reason, it's not anything negative. It's actually quite wonderful to have
yeah,
those connections. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if somebody would go to the doctor and say, well, these little beings were working on me, and they might end up going to a different kind of doctor after that.
I
So
know. I would imagine probably in most cases they don't
they don't
mention
tell the doctor that. Yeah.
being somewhere else other than Earth,
Yeah.
and these strange little beings are working with them.
Yeah,
So
unfortunately, we're not at that stage yet in our evolution that everybody understands that there are other beings that are here and working with us in a positive way. So, but we'll get there one day. We'll get
uh,
there. Good.
you and I are part of that,
Yeah,
helping more people to understand that.
that's right. And eventually the doctors will be on board with it too. So,
Yes,
all right.
I hope so.
Yeah, they will. All right.
Doctors can learn a lot from them.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to ask, I see Mary Grace has her hand up. So I'm going to bring you in, Mary Grace. Hold on a second. All right.
Hi, Barbara. Thank
Right?
you so much. This was so enlightening. My dearest friend, we met at a UFO group. I was convinced that he was a hybrid. I call my friend Tom. I don't think I don't think he realized it, but over the years I came to see one of the things I wanted to ask you is he has a quirky personality. And I was going to ask about that, like little quirky personality things. But then the fact that his mother was a abductee up until her 80s, until she died, his entire life. So that was my first clue. Um, Also, when we first became friends, he started sharing his experiences. It started when he was 14 years old, and we just met 5 years ago. Um, he's been basically, it's been weekly, he's been taken. And so this is when you say they're visited a lot, I mean, he just checks all the boxes. So it helped me to better understand my friend. So, but yeah, and I think now the in the last couple years, and he's had many regressions. He has met at one time, he was on a ship and he was surrounded with a circle of 36 beings that he understood that were all his children, and they're now coming. He's getting a lot of nice visits now, so where they're coming and visiting and sending energy and stuff, where it was kind of where you're taken and screaming and kicking and screaming, but it really has evolved. And
Oh,
but yeah, I just wanted to ask you two things. One was a quirky personality. If you ever seen that show Resident Alien, it's a TV show. I mean, that's like my friend Tom. He's just and the other thing, like for example, whenever we go out to dinner or go someplace, he has to have an entire bottle of ketchup that he puts over his entire food, and sometimes it's not enough, and very specific. And the other two side effects I think are from that, or maybe being a hybrid, is anxiety, which I attribute to maybe being taken a lot or whatever, but also allergies. He has allergy shots once a week. So I just wanted to ask you if those were common things too with hybrids.
well, I've certainly never heard of the overuse of ketchup. I don't really think that has anything to do with
Well, I mean,
being a hybrid,
they're
but
just different odd things that aren't normal that
yeah.
that come out, but very kind, very compassionate, funny person. But only maybe because I know him better, that I see these quirky things.
Oh, right. Well, do you know if he feels different than most people?
He's now, realizes that he is a hybrid, and now that he's met, knows he has a lot of children and stuff on ships. He's never been married. He's never been able to have a relationship because of that. It's very much a loner. I think that's one reason we got along so well. But yeah. So one thing I did want to ask you about that if there was other things like anxiety or allergies, which I did hear maybe can be side effects of for a contactee.
Yes, well, the walk-ins, the first walk-in I knew about, um, went for help with a regression therapist because she kept having allergies to so many things. And I mean, it was really affecting her life. She could hardly do anything without having an allergy attack. And that's how she and that therapist decided or found out through the regression work that she was a walk-in, that she was alert. And see,
Oh,
the original person whom she did the soul exchange with um, had not been allergic to anything. And then suddenly, boom, one day, she was allergic to just about everything.
wow.
It was a remarkable turnaround. And so that, of course, was very puzzling. And she went for help, and they discovered that. And then this was the first time that that particular therapist um, had been aware of anything like this, uh, such a thing as a walk-in. She had not heard of that before. So they sort of discovered it together by doing that regression work. And so anyway, a walk-in could, you ask about quirky things.
Mhm.
A walk-in could certainly feel different from the other people he or she knows, and might have slightly different behavior because of that, because of being newly here and not exactly knowing all the little nuances of how we behave as humans, especially in those early days of being here. So, I mean, I'm not surprised that particular person whom you know, who is a walk-in, has some kind of quirky aspects. I mean, that is probably true with.
Yeah, I don't think he's walking. I think he's more ET hybrid, because his mother was a caretaker. Yeah.
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 Uh-huh. Thank you.
All right. Does anybody else? I know somebody had a question, Barbara. They wrote it in the chat, wondering, is your hand, Tina, is your hand up, or you want me to ask the question? Okay. Tina was wondering, do you think that there is a connection with NDEs and contactees, starseeds, hybrids, and walk-ins?
Well, I do now, and that doesn't necessarily mean that any one person has experienced an NDE and these other aspects, but there are some similar characteristics in some of that. In the NDE, the person definitely goes into another realm for a while before coming back, and that has some characteristics that are like some of the uh, more spiritually oriented extraterrestrials, that people are taken into a more spiritual realm by those beings sometimes. And there are a lot of similarities very often. Yeah, so some of the regressions that I've done, um, therefore, are uh, seeming to be more spiritually enlightening experiences, rather than the medical table type of thing. Uh, I mean, many people have had some glorious experiences that they have had that come out in regression. And it's wonderful when they know about that. Just like the near-death experiencer, I think it's wonderful and beneficial when that person who's had that experience can recall the details of it, because it's so magnificent. It's so glorious, so loving. The main thing is the loving
Yeah.
aspect of it.
Oh, yeah. And it's life-changing too when that
Oh,
happens. Oh, yeah.
very often, a person in either kind of experience gets to know more about their own particular mission here, purpose for being here, and would be much more likely to get on with that as a result of the near-death experience or the extraterrestrial experience.
Yes, thank you. I was asking a question, and then we have another hand. So wants to know, would love to know your thoughts, what your thoughts are about all of the many UFO sightings these days. So do you have any thoughts about that, Barbara?
I do. I actually think a lot about that. Well, I think personally, myself as a person, I think it's great that more and more people are seeing them and more people are talking about it. I mean, there have always been some people who have seen those sightings, but they try to talk about it and people say, oh, you're loony, you're just crazy. It's got to be your imagination. It's got to be a dream. It's got to be some sort of deception. And so they stop talking about it. Nowadays, it's becoming slowly more acceptable to
Yeah.
more people are. And especially, I think, with the government hearings,
Yep.
not only giving permission to people in the armed services to talk about it, but to ask them to talk about it, encourage them to report about that. So that's really good because these things are happening anyway,
Oh, yeah.
and more people can feel free to say what they've seen and educate other people, whether the people believe it at first or not.
Right.
And good because it may very well be that there will be more and
Mhm.
more. We don't know that, but we can guess that could happen, and more people sort of need to be aware of that, and I think not necessarily afraid of it. Uh, you know, of course, our governments are concerned with their own national security and would wonder if these vehicles that we see are a threat. And I mean, I think we can't really fault them for that, but there's so much more to it. And I think that the more that opens up from people to the lawmakers and people sort of in charge, the more that opens up about all this, the better. And I have yet to hear uh, in any of these hearings anybody talk about the personal experiences that people have with the occupants of those vehicles. And I'm definitely hoping that more will come out about that and that it will come out in a way that's balanced, that isn't just frightful and that people are feeling victimized, but also the part of it where people are feeling very inspired and very welcoming of it, and including the hybrid children. There's just a lot of different feelings that different people have about all of these things.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. I'm just curious about, have you had people come to you for hypnosis that have discovered through their hypnosis or found out more about being part of the SSP projects?
I've had some, yes,
Mhm.
certainly have had some. Um, One of them is a very well-known man who was part of the secret space program, and he did a regression. Oh, it was amazing what he remembered. I mean, just
Wow.
usually in a regression, um, I find myself asking a lot of questions to bring out details of the person's experience, because the more questions I ask, the more that they then are aware of, they put their attention to. And but with this one particular man who had been very active in the secret space program, uh, I asked maybe one or two questions to get it going once he was in a nice relaxed state. And then for the rest of the hour at least, maybe longer, he just spoke on and I never asked another question in the whole session
Ah,
because so much came up, which means that he was, in my opinion, so ready
yeah.
remember more than he had consciously remembered. And he said afterwards, he said, whoa, that is just amazing what I became aware of. And I know all of that is true, but I had
Wow.
not consciously remembered most of that.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's wonderful. That is wonderful.
uh,
All right. Hypnosis is a beautiful thing. And for so many people, really, really so helpful. Life
yeah.
change. All right. So I see Suzanne has her hand up. Let me bring you in, Suzanne.
Hi. I had so many questions, but you answered all of them along the way. I am curious, though, about orbs. Is there a connection of a lot of orb activity in the home and outside of the home? Like more with starseeds, more with hybrids, more with walk-ins? What is your experience with that?
Yeah, great question. I think that there is a connection that people who see a lot of orbs are probably maybe not known to them yet, but are probably having other experiences with the beings too. I think that the orbs can come from different places. Sometimes it seems to be more of a spiritual realm that they're coming from. Sometimes it seems to be more of an extraterrestrial realm. Anyway, they're from somewhere else. They certainly seem to make their appearance to some people and not to others. So, in other words, one person who sees orbs, they don't just see one orb once, but
Mm.
they'll see a number of orbs, a number. So, and that person often, at least so far in my work, has turned out to mean that they're also having experiences with one of those other realms, either a spiritual realm or extraterrestrial realm. And
Mhm.
I love it when orbs get filmed or caught, because it seems like they come from some other dimension of some sort. And it also seems like very often that they're conscious. They're conscious where and they will respond
Mhm.
to some of them,
Yeah.
to noticing them.
Yeah,
And
Suzanne has some that reappear over time. The same
Yeah.
ones. Yeah, right,
And
Suzanne?
they're very interactive.
yes.
They respond a lot to the singing bowls, to the vibration. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, have you experienced with that?
Yeah. And yeah.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you feel that you ever get any kind of a message from them?
No, I know that they're there to help. I'm not fearful, but I don't know who they are, and I stopped trying to figure it out because I don't know if I'll ever know, and if I'm meant to know, I'll find out.
Right. Yeah. So I became acquainted to knowing about orbs because of a good friend of mine who lives in Mendocino, California. And she lives in a little cabin in a clearing in a woods, in a forest near the ocean, Pacific Ocean. And she was seeing orbs and she started, right there outside her front door. And she started talking to a pink orb and saying, "Oh, you're so beautiful. I've seen you a couple other times. Thank you for coming again." Things of that sort. Welcome. The orb seemed to sort of move around as if responding.
Yeah.
And so after a while of talking to the orb, she said, "Okay, would you mind going up there to the top of that tallest pine tree over there?" And the orb did. It went up to the very tip top of that pine tree. And my friend thought, wow, this orb really followed, answered my request perfectly. So she said, "Oh, okay, well, thank you. Would you mind coming on down now and going over to that fire pit that's over there?" She pointed to where the fire pit was. And the orb did that. And she gave a couple more requests of where the orb would go, and it followed them. And so she realized, there definitely is a consciousness.
Mhm.
So orb. It's not
Yeah.
pink and round and beautiful, but it's responding exactly to her.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
came to the conclusion, I don't know if it was first experience or maybe a subsequent one, to the conclusion that that particular orb must be the spirit of her mother who had passed away a few years earlier, was visiting her. And then that opened it up for her seeing and talking to many orbs. So that first one was back in the early 1990s. And she continues to see orbs and photograph them. And
Yeah.
you,
That's great. That's
you,
wonderful.
you pictures of them?
Oh, yes, I have a lot of pictures, videos, a lot of videos too, and they are interactive. They love if I'm making something, like if I'm painting or creating something, they'll always be above it, like they're watching.
Oh, no.
Yeah, sometimes they'll match the color of what I'm painting.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
great.
And then I see ones that come back repeatedly, like I recognize them. And I have names for some of them, like there's Big Blue and the little baby. They come together all the time.
oh.
And
Are these inside or outside or both?
these are mostly inside because I'm mostly inside, but I have photographed them outside as well. But they're like the same. They're not huge like ships or anything. They're, like this.
I'm
Sometimes
curious, Suzanne, I know you moved recently from another state.
Yeah.
She used to be on Long Island. Now she's in North Carolina, right?
South, yeah.
South Carolina. I'm wondering, did the orbs from Long Island follow you to South Carolina?
I don't know if they're the same ones. I haven't seen like my familiar friends, but I set the singing bowls up in the loft. And when I play, they come in immediately, and like tons of them.
Oh, nice.
And the other day I got a video. One of them was like pulsating to the sound of the bowl, which was cool.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And I just thank them for being there. And yeah.
Yep. That's great. Well, is Big Blue from South Carolina or is Big Blue from Long Island?
Long Island.
Okay. Well, if Big Blue and Baby show up, I want to hear about it.
I'll send them to your house.
Okay. Well, I want to know if they travel from state to state. I'm just curious.
I know, right?
I'm sure they do. They can.
Yeah, I don't think they have boundaries of
Right.
space and like that way. Yeah.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you.
What baby orb will grow bigger?
Yeah, we'll see, right?
Yeah.
Time will tell.
Very, very special, Suzanne. And I those and videos and find a way to show them to other people, because it is a part of reality that we don't know very much about, most of us, or at all. And they definitely seem to be conscious.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I took an orb class once years and years ago at a spiritualist church, and they told us to call in whoever it is we want to show up. And so I called in my grandparents, and the guy took a picture. This was before cell phones. We had the digital camera that just came out, the 35 millimeter, but they had the big screen. You could see it. And then he had to develop it. But everybody that was standing behind him, when he took the picture, they all went, oh. So I was like, oh, I wonder what's going to appear. So then when he developed the picture, he gave it to me. There was this big orb on my shoulder, right? And then another crystal one up in the corner. And then one that looked like the earth up in the left-hand side. And I was like, oh my God, my grandparents heard me. So I went home, and a couple of weeks later, I had my reading glasses on, and I looked at the picture, and I could see my grandfather's face in the orb that was on my shoulder. And you could see the whole profile of his face. And he he looked like the exact picture that hung in his house that my mother painted of him that was there for like my whole life when I was a kid. And it was the same
Oh,
profile, like a 3/4 profile view of him. And you can see his glasses and everything. And my grandmother was in the crystalline orb. You could see her face morphing out of the center of it, but her face, and I always apologize to her because I think she was in the middle of forming because she looked a little skeleton-y. Sorry, Greg. She didn't really look exactly like herself, but I think she was still trying to form so I could recognize her. And then the one
yeah.
in the top looked like the earth. And so that to me, that's a precious picture. I have it in on my desk. And that's how I learned about orbs and how the spirit world can come to us in those orbs. Yeah.
Yeah.
And many different times that I've filmed UFOs and crafts and stuff in my yard, I have pictures of the beings inside these orb shaped, crafts that appeared in my yard. You could see feline beings in them, lion beings. My cat actually appeared in on top of one of the orbs, and my cat was alive, but his
Oh,
consciousness was in the orb. Yeah, I'll have to show you, Barbara. I have it all on pictures. But they're incredible. So that's how I know spirit can travel in them. Angels, ETs, all kinds of beings. And it's a lot of fun. Yeah. So,
oh, that's wonderful. You know, I am going to have to finish because I'm being picked up in a couple of minutes.
okay. Well, this
Onto
is good timing
so,
because we're at about 10 after 9, my time here. So, all right. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you.
Thank
that's
you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And thank you especially to Barbara. This was so fantastic having you here today. I just love hearing all about your new book that's coming out and everything that you have found out and discovered. And if anybody wants Barbara's book, you can order it either through your website, Barbara, or on Amazon. Is that how they can get it? Yeah. All right.
want a signed copy with a little.
Okay.
It's best to go to the website, or you
Okay.
without that through Amazon.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's wonderful. That's wonderful that you do that. All
Yeah.
right. And thank you again, Barbara. This was such a blessing to have you. And I hope you come back again and be part of our groups or come back and speak anytime you want. We love you and we so appreciate you here. Thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you. Thank you for what you do. It's wonderful. Thank
Oh,
you and participating in
yeah.
this.
Everybody was wonderful. And I loved all the questions and the enthusiasm and yeah, thank you everyone for being here. So,
Oh,
Thank you.
all
you.
right. If I don't have your email, please put it in the chat because I have some new things coming up. I want to make sure everybody hears about it. I'm starting a group. It'll be on Zoom, but it's called Long Island, New York IANs. And it's going to be for all different kind of experiencers, NDEs, STEs, UFO, ET, and all spiritual experiences. So it's going to encompass everything. But I'm going to start it. It's the third Wednesday of the month, and I'll be starting it in December. So I want to make sure I have you guys' emails. And I think I have yours, Barbara, and I have most of people, but maybe a couple people I don't. So I just wanted to put that out there. All right. So just put it in the chat if I don't have it. And I will see you all soon on Zoom.